Hi, it's Alex Moros with Keller Williams Premier Realty out of Woodbury, Minnesota, here with episode 3 of FAQ Friday, Frequently Asked Questions. Now, this week's topic is going to be what is representation and why is it important? Now, I kind of want to start this in a couple different ways. The first, really, I want to talk about the process, because I think the industry doesn't always do a good job of initially connecting realtors with buyers or realtors with sellers. Those who have already been through the process once or twice before, they probably have a preferred realtor, or they have friends or family who have moved who have a recommended realtor. I love word of mouth, love referrals myself, but there are a lot of buyers and sellers who are starting their search or their questioning of how to kind of get things moving online. Now, of course, that's the number one way that homes are found and shown is by buyers and sellers finding them online. And there are a couple of potential pitfalls that arise because of the way that buyers and sellers approach the industry versus knowing a realtor already. So the third-party sites, if you're poking around on the sites that are not realtor brokerage sites or direct portals to the MLS. If you're poking around on there, you're going to find a realtor, and when you click on a link to a property, it's going to hook you up with at least one, if not 5 to 10 realtors who may be able to assist you in getting into that property. Now, that's just one role of a realtor, is to help show properties. I know that that's not what I do all day, 40 hours a week. There are a lot of other things that I do kind of behind the scenes rather than just showing properties. So you may not, if that's the way you're kind of approaching it, be well equipped to discuss agency relationships and therefore representation with these folks who are opening a door and hoping that that's going to be the house. You're going to buy it right there. You're going to be able to do it. Now, there's nothing wrong with realtors doing that. That's kind of how a big chunk of the industry is set up, is that we're expected to be available at a moment's notice. I like to make myself available at a moment's notice. When I have the funds available, I pay for leads on those third-party sites so that I can meet up with people. But my approach is a little bit different, I find, than several other realtors out there doing basically the same thing, opening doors and showing homes. And that is talking about agency relationships and representation. So let me get into that. So when you meet with a realtor, whether it's me or someone else showing you a house, you found the house, you want to get in, there's nothing wrong with that. Go ahead and see the house, but be aware of what your relationship or potential relationship with that realtor might be. So, and this section is just going to focus mostly on buyers here at the front end. If I have time, I'm going to go ahead and address representation with sellers, but I kind of already did that in episode 1, talking about for sale by owners, talking about FSBOs. So I'd like to mostly focus on the buyer kind of interaction this week. So anyway, agency relationships and representation. When you meet with that realtor for the first time, there should be, enjoy the house, check out the house. You're going to talk about kind of what you're looking for, where you're at, in the process. But you should also talk about what a agency relationship might look like. So you can have a buyer's rep, you can have a facilitator, you can end up with a dual agent, but these are all terms. Facilitator is essentially what a realtor is going to serve you as the first time you meet up, and you're just kind of talking shop, you're not represented yet, and then you will either choose to work with them going forward, and they will choose to work with you, and you'll sign a buyer's representation contract. Now, what's important about that is that once it's signed and you guys agree that you're going to work together, there are certain duties that are owed you from your realtor that don't exist without that contract. Basically, the realtor underwritten contract needs to serve your best interest. And if they're not, you need to release yourself, from that contract and find a realtor who is serving your best needs. Now, what are your best needs? Now, you may know, you may not know. According to the paperwork and according to, how realtors are governed, we owe you obedience, loyalty, disclosure, accounting, and reasonable care, and confidentiality, of course. So these are serious duties, fiduciary duties, that under contract a realtor owes you. And for me, for my part, I expect the same, from the clients that I sign up with. I don't need to run my business just going and opening doors for people who end up using a different realtor. And so then I end up essentially a volunteer tour guide for houses. It's not a good way for me to make a living. So I expect the same in return: obedience, loyalty, disclosure, confidentiality, accounting, and reasonable care. I want to know that, we can have an honest conversation back and forth about your realistic or unrealistic expectations of the market, what I can or cannot do for you. I expect you to be loyal. If you find a house, if you see a house, if you hear of a house that's, on the market or not on the market yet, I expect you to text or call me to let me, kind of plug into that so that I can fulfill my contractual obligations of serving your best interests, right? Looking at market data, looking at the numbers, strategizing negotiations, how to start negotiations, figuring out with you where your accounting is, where your finances are, so that is this house really affordable, and at what point does it become unaffordable for you? And then I think also, confidentiality, the conversations, that we have, you're not going to go to the seller and say, hey, this is what my realtor said, because those conversations should be private, they should be protected, and they are protected by our contract. So, and it's that contract that gives you representation. Nothing else gives you official representation and building that trust and that relationship with a realtor other than a signed contract. So what it means when you sign, you don't have to buy something. If you don't buy something, the contract expires. That's it. But while under contract and while actively searching with the realtor that you sign your buyer's rep contract with, you're going to use them to go and see houses. You're going to work with them, and you're going to work with them exclusively to help you, figure out what to do with your investment and where to move, what to buy, all of those conversations, that we have. But essentially, it is what allows your realtor to get paid at the end of the day. Again, only if you close. You don't pay your realtor anything for this representation until the closing day. And actually, at closing, my paycheck is paid by the seller. So there may be a small admin fee on the buyer's side, representation due at closing, rolled into closing costs. So essentially, it's just a handshake. The contract is like a handshake. That's how I look at it, because you still don't owe me any money. Now, why is it important to have representation? So, for me, it's important. Why it's important from my side is that I want to know that I can give my all for my client. That there's no worry that, if I do my job as I'm supposed to do it, better than I'm supposed to do it, better than your expectations, that at the end of the day, I'm going to earn myself a paycheck. And that's really the only way I'm able to earn a paycheck is through representation and serving your best needs. So that's why it's important to me to be in a contract with a buyer. Sellers too, obviously, but we're talking about buyers right now. Why is it important for you? Well, there are stereotypes that exist about realtors and about salespeople, and I'm sure you have friends and family, or you yourselves have stories of working with some stereotypical salespeople, and they're out there. They're still out there. So they may, for example, I've come across this a couple of times where a listing agent, for example, you meet a listing agent at an open house, and I do open houses. Sometimes I'm, the actual listing agent. A lot of times I'm sitting in for the listing agent, but I'm representing the seller. But if the listing agent is doing the open house, they represent the seller. They're under contract. That's pretty obvious. They're there, they're serving their seller's best interests. At least that's what they're supposed to do via contract. And there are those that will tell a buyer coming in to the open house, hey, welcome, come on in. If you want this house, I can get you a deal if you just go through me. It's tempting, everybody likes to save money. I get that. But once they offer that they're going to give you a deal, who you guys just met, they represent the seller, they're going to give you a deal, they're no longer serving their client's best interests. 9 times out of 10. Right? Unless they've had a conversation with their seller and there's going to be some kind of an adjustment in the commission if they bring the buyer, something like that. But even so, they're really still serving their best interests, not yours. You may get a deal and the seller may be happy with the price that they end up getting from you. But those contractual fiduciary duties kind of get muddy. Now, the difference is, at an open house, you come in, you say, hey, I'm working with a buyer's rep. Fantastic. Come back for a private tour with them. What questions can I answer for you while you are here today? So that's how I try to keep my seller's best interests in mind when I'm hosting an open. Have I done dual agency? Absolutely. Is it really tricky? And do I make it explicit on both sides what exactly dual agency is before entering into an agreement like that? Absolutely. So looking for a deal from the listing agent, sure, again, maybe you're going to be able to save a little bit of money on the transaction, but if that listing agent isn't going to have the integrity to serve their client's best interests alone, what else might they or might they not disclose? Or, because if they're not going to have their clients loyalty, if they're not going to be loyal to their client, what other fiduciary duties, obedience, disclosure, confidentiality, accounting, and reasonable care are they going to be willing to forfeit on your end, on the seller's end, in order to get that deal done, because they're going to be able to double end it. So, and that's a gross exaggeration. Again, that's a stereotypical. There are agents like like that are out there. So, again, having representation and having a representative on your side helps create that necessary buffer between I'm representing your interests, the seller has their agent representing their own interests, and so then we can actually come to a mutually agreeable understanding and deal on the transaction without either agent sacrificing their integrity or their client's confidentiality or any of those other duties. So, kind of a roundabout thing. Play it over a couple of times. If you have follow-up questions, put them in the comments. That's kind of the best example, and so I think I'll leave it there for this week. Again, this was what is representation, why it's important. I'm Alex with Keller Williams Premier out of Woodbury, Minnesota, and I'd be happy to serve you. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. Thanks.